Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Book Brothers podcast. The podcast where two ex-brothers-in-laws, ex-brothers-in-law, talk about books, talk about writing, talk about all kinds of neat stuff pertaining to the literary world. I started off as a screenwriter for fun. I'm just now getting into the world of writing prose, as they say. But we're also discussing obviously the books that we read, and this go around we're talking Animal Farm, George Orwell's novel that actually he wrote before 1984. Did you know this? I thought
Yes, the
it was
classic. Yeah.
1984 and then he did Animal Farm, but no, he had banger after banger. So
Yeah.
Animal Farm, what is it? A satirical allegory that tells a story of farm animals who rebel against their human oppressors and establish a utopian society. However, the pigs who lead the rebellion eventually betray the animals' ideals and turn the farm into a dystopian regime. The story is a critique of totalitarianism. I'm glad I said that right the first time. And the dangers of blind obedience, which this couldn't be more relevant, couldn't be more topical in the current political climate we find ourselves in. Air David, what do you say?
That is true. Yes, very true. Yeah, Animal Farm is it's kind of funny. Our current environment definitely mirrors a lot of like what Orwell was talking about with Animal Farm in 1984. I don't know. It's kind of like scary with the realities of it that you could see it in reality, and then you see that he was writing about it in fiction. And I think we'll talk a little bit about it too with Animal Farm, but I guess he wrote it as a response to the Russian Revolution, like Lenin and that whole thing, and then Stalin eventually. But
Right.
we see, elements. You always see elements of it throughout history. There's always the phrase of like history repeats itself, but I like to think of it as like almost like this spiral where like certain patterns come back, and it's not always exactly the same, but there's going to be a lot of elements that are similar. So
Could you say that history is cyclical, like fashion?
yeah, sort of. Yeah, it's like a cycle, and then it keeps moving, and I don't know. It's very interesting. The older you get, you kind of see that those patterns play out, and so we're just at an odd time right now. So
Authoritarianism so hot right now, so hot right now.
it is.
No, but
Wrong. Yeah.
the funny thing is that when I read the book the first time, I immediately thought, oh, this is a satire on just how society works in general and how
Mhm.
we always somehow end up going towards authoritarianism, totalitarianism,
Yeah.
whatever, what have you. But it was specifically about the Russian Revolution, Stalin and who's the
Yeah.
other guy? Sorry, Lenin.
Lenin. Lenin. Yeah.
But it still continues to like be relevant because we always just somehow end up in this weird place where we, like populism takes hold, and guys like, well, you know who become popular out of nowhere, it almost
Yeah.
seems like, and then they get into power, and what happens, right? And
Right.
I don't want to be like one of those people that was like, oh, Orange Man bad 100%. I mean, yeah, he is bad, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but
Yeah.
we haven't the first time around we I wouldn't say that it was as bad as I think it could have been. I think that was as because I'm old enough to remember the George W. Bush administration, right? Like things were
Yeah.
really bad under
Yeah.
Bush.
You do.
And I know there's a lot of people out there that are watching and listening who are probably under the age of 20 who don't remember the Bush era, but it was bad. It was really bad. And we'll see how the next administration goes. But I think a lot of people are sort of collectively waiting. I think we as American society, are sort of collectively waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So after January.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I look at the long arc of history, so I still think something. I don't know. It's always the optimist in me. I always try to find the positive light on it. It's kind of difficult to see sometimes when you're going through difficult times, but yeah, I think it's just a reflection of society too. I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think people are bad. They're just misinformed. There's a lot of ignorance around. There's a lot of media. Um, it's kind of funny too. An Animal Farm. This kind of relates to the real world too. But an Animal Farm, when Napoleon decides to do his like it's what's the other is it Snowball and Napoleon? So you
yeah,
have Snowball and Napoleon, the two pigs, and initially their like revolution is like in good faith. Like they even have their commandments. What's really cool about Animal Farm is like they have the seven commandments, I
Yeah.
could go over them real quick. So the first one is whatever goes upon two legs is an enemy. So
Mm.
they immediately label humans as an enemy.
Right.
Then they say whatever goes upon four legs or has wings is a friend. Then number three is no animal should wear clothes. No, number four is no animal shall sleep in a bed. Number five is no animal shall drink alcohol.
Mm.
It's like a prohibition. Number six, no animal shall kill any other animal. And number seven, all animals are equal.
Yeah, and then
So
they add an amendment to the last one, right? All animals are equal. Some are just more equal than others.
yes. So what's
And
funny is, I mean, a lot of these, except maybe like the first one. The first one is like definitely a satire where it says whatever goes upon two legs is an enemy. Because like we generally, he's obviously being overly satirical here, like Orwell with his writing, where he's like poking fun at like, oh, they're an enemy. Like we don't actively do that. We always say we're the good one, and we always do it from a place that we're good first. We don't. We do label enemies sometimes, but we're always saying, oh, because we're good. So, but he's just being satirical with that one over the top. But I think the other ones are all kind of like related to like humans, what we like to say, we're all equal. We should not hurt anyone else. Um, Wearing certain clothes, that's maybe more like a religion or something, some certain like dogmas or doctrines they should follow. But then yeah, as you talked about, Adrian, it's just funny as the novel develops in certain they have clashes with like the other farmers and stuff. And I believe like Boxer, like one of the I think it's
one of
Boxer,
the horses,
uh
yeah.
one of the horses gets like injured, and then they end up like shipping him off and like selling him or
To the
something to like
glue
another
factory.
yes, to the glue. I was like, oh, and then they
Is that where
lie to
that comes
other
from, by
animals.
the way? Is that where that trope comes from?
From
I was
what?
just realizing that. Like, when they say like, oh, we're sending the horses off to the glue
Oh, the glue.
factory.
Oh,
Did it
maybe.
originate in this book? I'm
Maybe. That could be. I
curious.
don't know. But yeah, what's funny is like Boxer was always he was always had a good heart and a good nature towards that revolution, the ideals that they had. But then they like turn their back on him and they just sell him immediately when they can profit off of it.
Yeah.
And so it relates to a little bit of that power, that corruption that happens when in the reality it's like, yeah, there's some kind of there's harsh truths on Animal Farm, just like in reality too. And so that comes ahead in the book where they end up just selling him and they just lie. So Napoleon and the other pigs, they just lie about what happened to him. And, they just say, oh yeah, I forget what was the lie that they told about Boxer to the other animals. They actually give a lie to the other animals
Well,
about what happened to
I don't
Boxer.
remember the specific lie, but what I like about that is that it's definitely revisionist history, right? Which we're
Yeah.
seeing all the time. We're seeing it right now.
Yeah.
How people rewrite history, and this book is almost a perfect primer for 1984 because in that book, a big part of the story there is how they're constantly rewriting history, like literally day by day, they're rewriting history to make it fit the agenda of the day for those in power. So I really like
Mhm.
that one. The other one I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about more was the like the whatever goes upon two legs is an enemy. What I
Mhm.
like about that one is that the U.S. throughout the decades, like the enemy always changes. Like you know, Cold War, it was the Soviets, and then post 9/11, it was people in the Middle East, right? Like terrorists, Al
Yeah.
Qaeda,
Yeah.
and so on. But like
Mhm.
the thing about that is the reason why it changes is obviously because we make our own enemies.
Yeah.
So I always
Yeah.
found it interesting how like how quickly the narrative can change for like generation to generation. The enemy is always the big enemy at the time is always going to be different because and like who are we making an enemy out of this time? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was like my fit. I think that is so fitting as like the first rule that their first commandment.
Mhm.
Because who knows if this had been a series, one day the humans are the enemy, but who's the enemy the next time? Then in the next book, it could very well be the horses or the chickens or the you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't
It
know. I
always
just thought that
changes.
was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talking about the those commandments that change, I'll go through those real quick. So yeah, number four was the original one was no animal shall sleep in a bed, and then they changed it to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets, and then they changed number five to no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. So you can see that even there, that's kind of like the old prohibition one from the 1920s or whatever. It's like, oh, this isn't working, so you just can't drink that much. It's kind of a
Right.
funny aside on that. And then no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. So again, a big satirical one there. Like no one would actually put these in the a constitution or anything like that, but obviously it's being over the top with satire here. But
Yeah. Well, I
yeah, I
mean,
just
yeah, it makes sense for it to be their constitution, right? Um,
yeah.
and I think that's why those commandments are so brilliant. Because they're called commandments, right? They're not called like, I feel like that has a very much a religious connotation. And like in real life, we have our Bill of Rights, right? And then like they say, oh, there's separation of church and state, which doesn't really
Mm,
exist. But let's be honest, big Christian population in the US, obviously,
yeah,
and they do have commandments. And
right.
oftentimes, how often are they sort of like the line between commandments and state rights or state laws or whatever, like it gets blurred
Right.
so
Yeah,
much.
they definitely fuse. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. It's
it's
definitely
funny to me.
yeah. It's difficult because like you want to like the older I've gotten to, I've thought about different religions and stuff because you want to have like as many like even if you're like a non-believing person or you're open or you're a free thinker or whatever, like you want to be as open to religions as possible because you don't want to like demonize any one group. But it's just a problem when one group overtakes another, especially when in the religious context, because then they view their God as superior or their beliefs as better. And so
Yeah.
it's really like, I don't know, it's more of an equality for religion as I see it, but a lot of people just don't see it that way. So it's unfortunate. It's just going to mix and match we're probably just on that timeline of it's just going to be like that for a little while, and we're definitely a Christian nation. So,
Well, what really grinds my gears is the notion that you need religion to have a moral compass. I mean, I've had people in my own family who have said that, who have
mm,
actually told me that,
I'll say that. Yeah.
because I'm not religious, and like, and this person said, well, how can you be moralistic, and if you're not, I'm like, what are you talking about? I am perfectly capable of having morals without having to be religious, but that's a
Yeah.
whole nother that's a whole
Yeah.
nother can of worms you won't
Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily get into. But I don't know. I
I
think
think it
this
just
book
relates I
should
think
be
it relates to the
required
commandments
reading.
that we're talking about. Yeah, it
Yeah,
relates to the commandments talking about like dogmas and stuff like that. So it has
yeah,
a religious, subcontext to it. Yeah, the
yeah,
final one I wanted to bring up to Adrian is the one that you mentioned too. We could talk a little bit about it more, but where it says all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others,
yeah. That's my
and
favorite one.
that's like the best one at the end when they end up, they actually end up harming other animals, and so Napoleon kind of changes the I don't know if we know the exact pig that changes it, but we can assume it's Napoleon that changes the commandments and he makes it his own like propaganda. So we just see the Orwell's talking about how propaganda then becomes the new commandment because whoever's in charge, he just keeps changing it. And then at the end of the book too, as the animals age and some die off, it talks about this too, how new animals are replaced and they just get into the new system. And if,
Yeah,
if he's changing the old way, they don't know what the old one was, and they just, oh, this is what we're born into. And so, like, it's just
yeah.
they come into a corrupted system, and so we find ourselves in some ways too in a system that's not exactly ideal. And so it's like, oh, here we are.
That's why I said earlier, like if you're under the age of 20, you're not going to be really remember, like the Bush years, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how much that really changed I can't speak tonight. How much that changed the trajectory of the country, of the United States,
Sure, sure.
because they established so much, like this is how things are going to be done now, and it's not like the next party came in and really turned everything around. If anything, they did even more of the same, right? I mean,
Yeah, some of it,
I
yeah.
believe the NSA wiretapping stuff was went full throttle under Obama,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously things like even things like mass deportations, right? Which is the big thing right now. It's like, oh, how is the next administration going to do mass deport? Well, I mean, we've been doing it pretty
It's already
much
been a thing.
consistently
Yeah,
since
yeah,
going back to
right.
Reagan, probably. But
Yeah,
the the
I think
next
now
the
it's
next
more
admin wants to
vocal.
go supersonic with that.
Yeah. I just think nowadays it's like it's a lot more it's almost like it's a weird like inversion because like before like an Animal Farm too, it talks about like a lot of propaganda and they try to hide things and they try to say like, oh well, these people are more equal than others. nowadays what we're seeing, at least in our current environment, is it's more like even less propaganda. It's more like mask off stuff where they're just being open. They're just being like, oh yeah, we're just gonna deport people, or we're just gonna do this. Whereas before they were trying to hide a little bit and masquerade a little bit. Oh no, we're still being equal, but now it's a little bit more just like in your face with it.
And
Um,
that's the other thing too, is that mask off is, you're absolutely right. Any shred of decorum is basically gone now. And the young people of today who are coming up, it's going to be normalized for them. Like they see what the politicians and people in
yeah,
charge, they
yeah,
see how they behave, how they act, what they say openly, and to them, oh, this is just how it is. They
yeah.
don't
This is
remember
normal.
a time before when you actually
Yeah,
had some amount of decorum, even if
some
our
civility.
politicians weren't the greatest. At
Yeah,
least they had some shred of decorum, but
yeah.
that's gone now
It's
too.
few and
So.
far between, nowadays. You still see some, but it's few and far between. But yeah, like I think that relates to the book too, just how like this aging system, people will be born into it, and this will be the new norm. This current environment, which is pretty not great, very toxic. But I don't know. I just try to educate people. Me being a teacher, I try to educate the kids as best I can.
You
I
should
think I
have
think we
them
should.
read this book. I'm serious. This book
Yeah,
should be
yeah.
required reading. I
Definitely.
mean,
Well,
there's a
definitely in
lot
high
of
school
good books,
it's
but
required, right? I don't know. Should we be in middle school? Do you think Animal Farm should be in middle school? Probably
no, I would say high school, just
high
because
school.
they're
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
older.
That's what my
They're
brother.
they're
Yeah,
learning more and more. I would
yeah,
say this book should be required reading like junior year and higher, because now
yeah.
you're transitioning them from juniors to seniors and then into college and so on. And I
Yeah.
feel like you're sort of putting that seed in their minds about how the world kind of works. You know what I mean? And how
Mhm, mhm.
like this book, and then you follow this up in 1984, and then they go into college, and then they start to learn more about stuff.
Yeah.
I think it should be required. I really do. And there's a lot of books that are required reading throughout school, right? But
I feel like is 1984 required reading? I feel like it should be.
no,
I don't know
I
if it
mean,
is.
obviously every
Animal
school
Farm
district
is,
is
but
different. Every
yeah,
school district, every state, and all that.
yeah.
And we won't even touch on the whole book ban thing, because that's a whole other
Sure,
can of
yeah.
worms.
It's a whole different.
This
Yeah, yeah,
this
right.
would definitely be up there with 1984 and
Yes.
many other
Oh,
books
for sure.
that are getting
Yeah.
banned.
And like you said, Adrian, too, like I do think Animal Farm is a great precursor to 1984. I feel like 1984 is like his masterpiece, but then like Animal Farm is a great, like, that's why it's like, I think in high school, it's kind of like that first, it's a good initial, like, of his ideas about authoritarianism, totalitarianism, about how it becomes corrupted, propaganda gets into the system. Um, and one thing I want to talk about too is it's called Animal Farm. I love the name Animal Farm too because obviously he's mocking or animal nature, and that comes out when it comes to power. And my question to you, Adrian, is can that be changed? Can somehow I feel like if people become knowledgeable that we are part animal, but there's another part of to our humanity that is above the animals, like where we if we acknowledge that there's a part of us that is animalistic, as well as acknowledge that we need to try to do the best we can to overcome that. I think that's where the balance comes in, where unfortunately, what happens is people in power, they go full animal and they just go full power, full authority, full like, I don't care, whatever, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. And we see that now. And like, how do we, I don't know, like obviously with education, that's a big part of it. That's just like, can that ever be overcome, or are we always going to have these cycles?
Oh, it can be.
It can be.
It would require an actual revolution on the part of Americans who are fed up. But
Yeah.
and I've been thinking about this, so I'm glad you bring it up, because
Yeah.
I include myself in this. I think that we as Americans were too complacent to get off the couch and actually do anything about anything at the end of the day.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that you bring it up during a time when and not to get too topical, but during a time when the CEO of a large healthcare company was assassinated by
Yeah.
a regular everyday
Exactly.
guy who, by the way, it's coming out that this guy doesn't have like mental health issues. He's not crazy or whatever. Like
Hmm.
he was born into a pretty wealthy middle class family, went to an Ivy League school, had a really good career, making like good money. I mean,
Hmm.
this isn't somebody who just crawled out of the crawled out of nowhere to kill
Yeah.
somebody. This is somebody
Yeah.
who had a privileged life and took it upon
Yeah.
himself to do this, to take somebody's life, which I
Yeah.
don't advocate for. I know there's a lot of
No.
jokes and
Yeah.
memes. I don't advocate
Mhm.
for violence,
Mhm.
but this person decided, he was fed up with the system, and
Right.
he decided to do something about it. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to spark some grand revolution. I don't think it's going to. I think we're too complacent, and so it is possible to change, but I don't think we're gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen with
I
us
think
with what we are.
Yeah, I think your take on complacency. So Animal Farm really talks more about like power and authority and propaganda and just like maybe more like big egos, like the animal side of us that wants to like be in charge.
Right.
Whereas I feel like what you're talking about, the complacency, that's like another book. That would be Brave New World is a good one on that, talking
Yeah.
about entertainment and everything, how that is a corrupting
Drugs.
influence. Yeah, drugs, entertainment, how you're just so complacent, which is good, but too much of that is also not so good. So it's about there's a balance that needs to be, I don't know. It's a hard equilibrium. It's a balance that needs to be had.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's the thing. I mean, the propaganda works. It's working right now, right? I mean,
yeah,
who owns all the mainstream media? Corporations.
corporations,
And
yeah, a
they all
handful
have
of
an
them.
agenda. Whether it doesn't even matter. Like, yeah, Fox News, I know that's easy pickings, right? But like CNN, MSNBC, all the major media outlets are owned by somebody
Yeah,
who is part of the 1% or 10%. And that's where people get their news from. Like it's still there, all the legacy media, they still have a stranglehold on the American public, I think, especially Fox News, and so the propaganda works. It works to keep people uneducated. It works
mhm.
to not like. That's why the school system, the public school system, as they say, is so. And I hate to say it, I know you're a teacher. That's why
Yeah,
it's so screwed up because
yeah.
it's better to have an uneducated public than to have an educated public who like realizes how bad things really are. That
Yeah.
goes
I think
against their interests, right? That goes against
right,
the
right.
interests of the ruling class, of your Napoleons and your Snowballs of the world.
Mhm,
I don't know if
mhm.
was Snowball one of them. I can't remember exactly.
He was like one of the ones that began the revolution, and he was actually one of the idealists. And then when he saw Napoleon corrupt it, he spoke out against Napoleon, and so he got sent away.
Gotcha.
He got taken care of. So poor Snowball got
So
taken care of.
yeah, so
Because
the
Snowball had
propaganda
a
works.
good intentions with his revolution, whereas Napoleon just saw it as a means to gain more power for himself,
Yeah, and what do they
which
what do they say
happens
about
in
intentions? Like the road to heck. I'm gonna say heck because I
yeah,
know this is.
yeah, you can say
I know
that,
you're gonna show this to to children. So the road to heck, kids, is paved with good intentions.
yeah. She's right.
I hope that the next generation of kids reads this book, reads 1984, Fahrenheit 451, uh, uh, A Brave New World, and I feel
Yeah,
like that's the
New
cocktail
World is really
of
good.
books that will radicalize the next
Yes,
the next generation. I hope so.
yeah.
Anyway, Animal Farm. Did I
Um,
like it? I loved it. I still love it. It sits on my book mantle as one of my top favorite books, you know.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
fantastic book. Yeah, I personally I love 1984 like more because it's even more mature, and I feel like we talked about like this is like a great starter piece for 1984, which is much more even more mature and adult
yeah,
themed. Animal Farm is kind of like that middle ground, and it hints at the authoritarianism and propaganda that is in 1984 to the extreme.
yeah.
And then just to finish up with Animal Farm, I'll give the last line here. I mean, we've already talked about the book a little
Oh,
bit,
I
but I'll give
love the last line. It's
the
so
last
true.
line. I have to say the last line. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. And I love that line. It's like which is which, because the whole idealism of the revolution was to have this great society, and animals are going to work together and be perfect in union and harmony, and it just falls apart, and they end up being just as corrupt and shady as the former farmers, the humans that they overthrew. And in fact, Napoleon and some other pigs, I believe other pigs are with him, and they're like, were they playing like a game with the other farmers? They're playing like a game, right? Like poker, I believe, or something.
Yeah.
They're playing a game with the other humans, and they're so it's almost like this corporation, this corrupt system that is, it just relates to reality and to our world, and like that's what power does, corruption. So,
This book is a layer cake of literary genius because there's
yeah,
so many layers to every aspect of it, especially that last bit. You could
yeah,
apply that to pig to man could be corporations and the government. It could be easily be Democrats and Republicans, you know. You
Yeah.
look left to right, and you almost don't even see the difference anymore, right? So
Sometimes, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I love about that final line. It's so chilling because it's just so true to real life. And I don't know that that's ever going to change. You know what I mean? I think corruption is an
Yeah.
inherently bad human trait it's never going to go away,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
we can try to quell, what do you call it, corruption as much as you
Yeah.
can. Oh, is that your copy?
Yeah, that's my
Um,
copy. It's the cover. It's kind of old, but it's
yeah.
pretty cool copy. But I
Oh,
don't know what your copy is if you
I
have it.
would I should have brought mine's the minimalist cover with the white.
Oh, okay. So it just has the title.
I like that vintage cover though. That's cool.
It's
That's
pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's in good shape too. And the great thing is very short. So if you guys are interested, it's like just over 100 pages, like
that's the
super
best
short,
thing about this book is
like
that
a
it's so
tiny
short.
novel.
It's a
Yeah,
novella.
yeah.
1984 is not much. I mean, 1984 is longer, but it's
It's
not
like
much.
250. Yeah, it's not. It's a small novel. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that he wrote short books that are so relevant to society because, you don't have to write this huge tome to like, get the
No,
point
yeah.
across.
Not like Ayn Rand or whatever, which is just like
Oh
thousand
God,
pages.
Ayn Rand. You want to get into
Although,
Ayn Rand? I don't want to
yeah,
get into
maybe
Ayn
we'll talk
Rand.
about. We can talk about Anthem. The Anthem was a short one. That one's a short story. It's pretty
Is that
good.
Ayn Rand? I didn't know that was
Yeah,
her.
Anthem.
Okay.
Anthem. Yeah, yeah. I read that in high school. That was pretty good. That was a short
Yeah.
one. I never read her larger works though. I heard they're kind of mixed reaction to them, so I never ended up
I've
reading
never
them.
read them either, and I refuse to ever read her. And I
We'll
forget
talk about her in the
which
future.
book it is that has like for like 100 pages. It's just some guy on a speech. It's just a monologue. Like what?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that was Atlas Shrugged or something. Yeah, it's like a super long speech. It's just him talking for like
That's so
part of the
ridiculous.
book. It's like crazy. It's like
If I were to read that and I were to come across that and I would see that it just keeps going and going, I would just stop the book right there. I'm not reading
yeah,
this.
right,
I
right.
can't do this. But yeah, it's so funny. Ayn Rand is such a divisive author, for I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
almost
think
relevant to what we're talking about, but just politically,
yeah.
she's such a
I think
divisive.
like bring it back to Orwell here a little bit. Like I think Orwell, like Ayn Rand, maybe has interesting ideas and philosophies, but Orwell had his philosophies and did it well within writing in a literary world. Whereas I think Ayn Rand like struggled with her writing. She wasn't
Yeah.
as great of a writer, I think.
Wasn't she like a
Literary.
libertarian's wet dream, Ayn Rand?
Yeah, probably.
I'm curious now that we're talking about it, where do you stand on libertarians, David? I have to know.
What do I say on libertarians?
Yeah, I mean, I
Very
figured,
much
no.
I used to be, I mean, like if we're getting into politics a little bit, I mean, I used to be super on the left. Like I still consider myself like idealistically on like a way on the left. But, practically it's like I've seen the party system and just the nastiness of politics. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm much more apolitical nowadays. I'm definitely like some libertarian ideas I vibe with, like definitely the anti-war stuff is good. Kind of like stay to your own lane kind of thing. But there's a lot of like bad stuff that comes with that, like the anti-vax stuff and like the anti like medicine stuff. Where I'm like, well, yeah, big pharma is not great, but there's still lots of good medicine that's needed. I'm much more nuanced on libertarianism. I don't
Yeah.
know because libertarians like to say they also like to have this idea of like every man for himself or kind of like do your own thing, but no one's like separated. Everything is connected at the same time, and so like no one came into this world by themselves. We all need some support at some level. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
Well,
my take on it. I
the
don't know.
funny thing about libertarians rejecting like vaccinations and stuff like that is that I would think that they would inherently trust the science, right? And then like just because it's coming from the government doesn't mean you can't trust the science behind it, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I also get why they wouldn't trust the government when it comes to vaccinations and stuff because the government has done some pretty shady experiments in the past. So,
Right.
it's like how could you trust a government that is known to have done so many terrible things? experimenting on people and
Yeah.
probably even right now, for as far as I'm not trying to put on my tinfoil hat, but you never know what's going
Oh
on.
yeah.
So
There's always some shady things going on for
so
sure. So
it's interesting where libertarians stand on
yeah,
certain
I
things.
would say for me, yeah, for me, like I don't really identify with any like label. If you say like, oh, you're a liberal, I'm like, well, a lot of people would say that, and like, sure, I'm gonna vibe with that, but at the same time, I just go issue for issue. I'm a human. I'm a person. Like, let's just talk about it and think about it. Like,
Yeah,
I don't like to put a label on it anymore because like the older I got, I was like, you're just a person. Let's just talk about things in
that's
real
a great
time
point.
rather than
Yeah,
like it's going to come with a lot of preconceived. Even though me and conservatives are going to disagree on a lot of stuff, at the same time, there's probably going to be a couple things we'll agree on. There's going to be a lot of stuff we'll still agree on. So
absolutely. And liberals inherently uh, are for capitalism. So like I'm starting to realize like I have a lot of liberal ideals, but I'm not
yeah,
gung ho for capitalism the way I'm not saying liberals are gung ho for capitalism, but capitalism is part of being liberal, right? The free market and all that. So you
sure,
can't
yeah,
even
to
so
an extent.
I wouldn't even call myself a liberal necessarily just in that respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, we
definitely
could
more
talk.
of a leftist, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely talk more of that, with
Yeah,
other books and stuff like that another
yeah.
time. That'd be kind of fun. But yeah,
Yeah, but Animal Farm,
great book.
the first time I read it, yeah, good book, great book. Second time
Plus
reading
five
it,
out of five.
yeah, I 5 out of 5. Oh, easily for me, 5 out of 5.
Yeah,
Like I said,
yeah,
I do believe it should be required. Why can't I speak tonight? It should be required reading in schools, in high
yes.
school. So anyway, that's the book. All right,
Okay.
David, any final thoughts on Ye Old Animal Farm?
Final thoughts. So Orwell had a cool idea about this, why he came up with this idea. And he saw, before he wrote the book, he saw a little kid driving a cart horse, and he was whipping it. He was whipping this horse. And so he said that he basically saw humans exploiting animals like that. And so he said it struck him that if only animals became aware of their strength, we should have no power over them, and that men exploit animals in much the same way as the rich exploit the proletariat or the poor. That's what he said.
Wow.
So I thought that was really cool that he connected it to like I think animals have a lot more power than they think, and I think the poor have a lot more power than they think in some way. So
I've
cool.
never
Yeah, I just saw
thought
that quote. I
thought
thought it
about
was
that
really cool.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
that's a
That's
great, yeah,
yeah.
wow.
Thought that's a pretty cool idea
See, we're
to.
learning. This is a learning
Yeah,
channel, right? So we're learning.
right,
We're always
right.
learning. You're never too old to learn, I say.
Yeah, I thought that was
You
a pretty
know.
cool quote. So yeah,
So thank you for that. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Figured I
Well,
never dive into audiobooks to transition. We'll cut that and let's go to audiobooks.
audiobooks,
Yes.
the the discourse, does it count as reading or not? Now, let
No.
me just say,
No, I was gonna
uh,
just kidding.
audiobooks have helped me get more into reading, and it pumps my numbers up, right? With how many books I
Yeah,
read a year. But here's the thing. I mean, whether you're listening to an audiobook or reading it, you still have to process what's going on, right? So your brain still has to do the work of imagining the setting, the characters, and so on. Audiobooks make it a little bit easier, but it's not, it can't be a passive activity, right? Because, and believe me, even reading a book, it's easy to have your mind wander when you're reading a book where you're like your eyes are reading the words but your mind's not
right,
processing it. And I get the same thing when I listen to an audiobook where my ears are hearing the
right,
audiobook but my brain isn't processing it. So
right.
on that logic, I think it counts as reading. How say you?
Well, it's not reading. However,
That's
I'm not
semantics,
gonna.
my friend.
That's
That's
yeah, we're
pure
good.
semantics.
That's my argument. That's it. It's over. It's not reading. What are you gonna do? That's my first take on it. It's not reading. It's not the same. However, it's still good to do. It's just not to the level and the depth that you will get if you actually sit there and read the book. Because they're both challenging, like you mentioned. So, like an audiobook is challenging because like your mind will wander a little bit. Same thing with reading. But I feel like the problem with audiobooks, at least for me, yeah, I feel like your mind will wander a lot more, and it takes a lot less effort from the person to read it with both imagination, the reading effort. You don't have to visualize anything. There's no connection between the words. I think that's a little bit more where, I'm against audiobooks. At the same time, though, like I said, they're still good, and it's still a good pathway to get into reading more. And I think, if you're busy, everyone's busy. So like if you're on the road or something, I think putting on a good audiobook is still a great option. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good to hear the story, and it's good for the language, and just if you're interested in like Lord of the Rings or whatever, and you don't have the time to read all the books, that's fine. I'm not arguing against them. I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna say like what's better, what's more, like, I would prefer the book, by a lot than
Yeah.
the audiobook. But audiobook's a good step. So that would be
I
my thought.
disagree with one point you made.
Okay.
I very much am a visual person, so I'm always,
Okay.
in fact, and I tell one of my friends this, when I read a book, I'm casting the characters in my head. I use known people, mostly famous actors, to visualize each character, each main character in my head.
Okay.
Do you do this?
Yeah.
I always do this. So,
Uh, when I read books that are based on movies, yes, that helps a lot actually, because
but
then I can
not in
visualize it even
general,
more.
because I do it with every book.
It depends. I don't. I try to do it more, but I don't visualize probably as much as you when I'm reading.
Right.
But maybe a
So
little
that's
bit. I
see,
mean, that's
and
an extent.
this could probably be a whole episode in and of itself. What do
Yeah.
you picture when you're reading a book? What are you imagining in your mind's eye?
Uh, I don't know. I'm very like, maybe it's just I'm more of a word person, so I
Uh,
really like the words and the language itself. Like,
are you one of those people that doesn't have necessarily an inner monologue?
like what do you mean? Like, am I like?
Like I'm always thinking, I'm always talking in my head. I'm always talking to myself. I'm always like thinking, oh, what is this? What is that? Who is this? What do they mean by? I overthink, and I have this voice in
Yeah,
my
I
head, a
mean,
narrator. Do you? But a study came out like several years ago where they say not everybody has that. Like they process stimuli in a different way. I guess. Are you one or the other?
I don't know. I mean, like I have a little bit of inner monologue. I would say for
Oh,
me,
interesting,
it's
interesting.
more like I just really focus on the words. I also focus on like what the author was trying to say, because like what you said too resonated with me, where you said like, oh, sometimes you lose focus, and that happens with me.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
like you're going through, especially like we're reading another book right now, like Left Hand of Darkness, and that's the same
Yeah.
thing. When you're reading like a politically heavy book, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of like political stuff here. I'm gonna have to reread this, or what was she saying again?
Oh,
Like that
yeah,
happens a lot
all the
around me.
time. I'll be reading a sentence and I'm thinking, oh, I need to pay my electricity bill. Oh
Yeah,
man, what was that email that I got the other day? I need to
right,
probably
right,
and then I'm like, oh shit, I just read a whole paragraph. Let me go back
right.
and reread the whole thing and
Yes,
process what's going on. So that does
yeah.
happen to you. Okay.
Yes, that happens to me too. Yeah, but I just want to say, like, that's why the actual practice of reading is good, because it's almost like a meditation. You're forcing yourself, your attention onto this story
Yeah.
is still important. I just got to pay attention. Like, I do have things in the real world, but also the story is important. And so, like, that balance is needed, and you do need to focus on the words on the page as well. But yeah, that is still a struggle. I do feel like audiobooks are better for that, especially in our busy world. So like we talked about, like if you're super busy and you don't want to read a ton of books, audiobooks are a great option. I'm not gonna like, completely shun them. I think it's a good option for people that don't want to spend way more time reading and invest that much into a story. I think it's good. And like if maybe people are more visual in that way, like hearing the story, they can visualize it. Like, oh, this troll attacked this kingdom, and like, oh, a bunch of arrows or whatever, whatever story you're reading.
Yeah.
Maybe people help give it just a fun visual rather than getting into the details of like the literary, like character and setting and all this other stuff. Which maybe if you're more of a book person, you prefer a little bit more. So
Yeah. I will say that the problem of mental drift when you're reading versus when you're listening to an audiobook is worse for me when you listen to an audiobook. I will easily mentally drift more when listening to an audiobook than when I'm actually reading it.
mhm.
But here's the great thing about audiobooks. You see, you can't read a book while driving, but you can listen to an audiobook while driving. I
Yeah,
think
right.
that is key for me because I drive. I mean, I'm sure you do too. I drive
Mhm.
every day, right? Like half an
Yeah,
hour to drop off my kid, half an hour to go
right.
back to work. That's an hour right there on the road that I can listen to. I can, kill a few chapters that way. And then,
Yeah,
I recently drove down to New Mexico to visit family for the Thanksgiving holiday. I killed two audiobooks going
Yeah.
there and coming back. I
Right. Right.
finished them. I'd already started them, but I finished both of them. And
Mhm.
like that to me is such a huge accomplishment that I can finish two books, over the course of a 6 hour drive, five and a half hour
Yeah.
drive, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For sure.
because you can't do that. You can't read a book while driving. You shouldn't, by the way.
Yeah, you should not. I would agree
So
with that. Do not read a book while driving.
yeah, so that's why I like to. That's why I consider it reading because you still have to process. So, you still have to, like have the story. Engage with the story in a way. You don't think so though.
It's not. It's like a podcast. It's like you're listening to a podcast. It's like you're
Like
engaging.
this
I
one.
would say an audiobook is you're engaging with the story and you're visualizing a story, but it's not reading. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like reading is another level, but it's still good. I'm not gonna like say it's bad.
yeah.
I'm just saying I don't classify it as reading.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm glad that we're of sort of two minds about this because I think it's good to have a healthy amount of discourse on this show. But
Yeah.
the other thing I want to say about audiobooks as well is that sometimes some audiobooks just have more production quality than others. For example, I'm
Yeah.
listening to it's a Star Wars book. It's one of the canon books called Catalyst,
Huh.
and they incorporate sound effects, music, like transitional sounds. Like they really put a whole production. Most audiobooks
Yeah.
don't do that. Most
No.
audiobooks don't
No.
will
Yeah.
just have, it's
Just
just
to read.
straight, reading the
Mhm.
book. But this audiobook for Catalyst is so much more well produced. And here's the thing, if I had just read the book itself, you wouldn't get
Mhm.
that. I wouldn't get that. But so it's nice that there's a production to it
Yeah.
that they decided to
Yeah.
do with that.
Speaking
So
of production, yeah, so on my channel, on my babysitting YouTube channel. So speaking of this, I kind of did my own audiobook. I'm poo-pooing audiobooks here, but I just
nice.
did I just did my own story. So I wrote that first chapter, which you read, Adrian, about my sci-fi story called Morel's Cradle. But
Yes.
eventually I might do a longer story with it. But I just did this first chapter of this story and I posted it on my channel. So anybody wants to check out my babysitting channel, you can check it out. But with it, so I did an audiobook of it, but also I did visuals. So I did the fun like
Nice.
visual auditory thing with it because I've seen that with children's books and stuff, and I kind of want to do that with like other material. So like kids could definitely read it. It's safe for families and everything. It's just a fun sci-fi story that I wrote. But yeah, I like doing it on my channel too, like adding a visual element because it makes it like a movie. I'm
Yeah.
just one person doing my own thing, but I like adding the animations with it. So
Right.
for me, it's like as long as you're like, I always like people to actually read the words. So like in that sense, like a video animation, you have to like look at the animations and then read the words too. I mean, you could use that as an audiobook theoretically, so people can just do that too, which is fine. But I like adding the visual element to make it like a movie. So I did that on my channel, and I like that element of it.
It sounds like you took a bit of a mixed media approach to that, which I think is
Yeah,
awesome. And by
yeah,
the way, if you're not already following him, Jason Pargin is an author, and he's a TikTok
okay.
content creator.
Mhm.
He's great. His TikTok stuff is fantastic. Jason Pargin, he just came out with a
Decent.
book called I forget what it's called. It's something like This Black Box of Doom is Worrying Me. He always has really long titles for his books, but here's the thing.
Okay.
He made a trailer for a little trailer. I don't know if he made it, but he had a trailer produced, like a little visual trailer produced
Okay.
for his most recent book. And I thought that was so cool because you never see that
Yeah.
with books, right?
Yeah.
So
Not too often. Yeah.
yeah, so I think mixed media is like the way to go, especially I mean, no matter what your audience, but especially like for younger audiences and stuff. I
Mhm.
think younger audiences are definitely gonna be more visually
Yeah.
stimulated. So
Yeah.
like it's great that you're taking that approach to it. By the way, I meant to ask you that chapter I wrote. So
Yeah.
what's the log line? What's like the summary of what the story's about, by the way, for that?
For the story that I wrote, or
For yeah, like that chapter you mentioned, what's the
the chapter. Yeah.
overall
Yeah, so it's called Morel's Cradle. The overall theme is this explorer. She's investigating an alien world, and she has to find life, if there's life on this world or not. And you'll see it that she discovers alien life there, and the rest of the story potentially will be like her exploring other worlds and other life forms. And I just liked it as a way to like explore other cultures and other alien like beings and stuff like that, and other worlds. And there's this whole council that has this in my imagination right now, she used to be like a cartographer. She used to like map worlds, and now she's like discovering alien like creatures, discovering their language, their culture, if they're peaceful or not. So that's kind of the idea of the story for me. I really got inspired from like Metroid and like that whole universe of like exploring
Mhm.
alien worlds and like figuring out, kind of like scanning things and like exploring like what's this? Is this safe or not? Is there life forms here or not? You know, is this
Yeah,
world safe for life? So I just like the idea of exploring other cultures and other alien life forms. So
that's awesome. I can't
yeah,
wait to read your finished manuscript, whatever you have
yeah,
there,
yeah.
man.
So
I wanted
maybe in the
to,
future I'll write more on that. So we'll see.
you should.
Yeah.
And by the way, not to get too much into science stuff, but hey, we're talking about it. The idea of there being life out there, I was thinking the other day, isn't it safe to say at the very least that there's on any rocky planet with water, that there's at least bacteria life on that planet? Like, I know we can't prove that definitively, but isn't it safe to say that
Not proven
there's a
yet.
huge chance there's at least bacteria life on other planets? Never mind intelligent life. If we could just say, oh, there's bacterial life on other planets, wouldn't
Yeah,
that
I
be a
mean,
huge breakthrough for science to be able to say that?
I wish we could just say that out, but that could be our own, bias getting in the way, because like we need water, so we're like, well, other life form must need water too. That could be a
Right.
thing. We
And
don't
there's
know
bacteria.
100%.
There's got to be bacteria in
It's
water.
possible. I mean, I do think Europa is the likeliest candidate to find that out. Europa and Titan are the two. Europa will probably be first because it's closer to us. It's a moon of Jupiter.
Yeah.
So Europa will be the first one that we'll have to explore because there's a huge ocean under the ice of Europa. So Europa is the one to go look for because it's got a huge ocean. So that potentially, if there's enough heat at the bottom of it, there could be enough like hydrothermal vents. There could be like that mixing of enough heat with the water. I mean, there could be tons of bacteria down there. So
What about Mars? Mars is supposed to have a big ancient ocean
yeah,
like it did as
right.
well.
Yeah, I mean, potentially they know that water used to flow on Mars because we can see the dry rivers and everything on there.
Yeah.
So we know that water used to flow on there, and there's ice. The polar ice caps. There's still ice caps there. So it's possible. I mean, we haven't confirmed it, but maybe if we live long enough, we'll find out. Maybe in the 2050s or 60s or I don't know. Send more probes and hopefully we'll find out. I don't know. I think that would be among the biggest, especially like talking about like religions and just like a humanity cultural shift. I think that would be a huge one for like, even if we find bacteria, I think that's going to be a huge shift for humanity. Like, wow, we're not the only life in the
Yeah.
universe. It's confirmed. It's just like, wow, like life is like really important, and we're also not the only ones. So who knows what's out there if that's the
And
scope.
and yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing how big the universe is. I mean, and never mind the universe, just the Milky Way galaxy alone. I mean,
Yeah.
there's trillions of stars. I mean, in the Milky Way itself, there's probably like several trillion stars, and most of those
Mm-hmm.
stars have planets. And
Mm-hmm.
and even if only a small percentage of those planets are rocky and have water and stuff,
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh
come
yeah.
on.
It's
By
out
the way,
there.
fun science fact of the day that I really wanted I'm excited to talk about is if you took our local solar system and you shrunk it down to the size of your hand, right?
Uh-oh.
Just
Movies
your
again. Okay.
hand.
Right. Yeah.
At that scale, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of North America. That's
Okay.
insane to me.
So the
Just our
wait,
local
wait.
solar system, just
If we shrunk
our
our solar
yeah,
system,
was the size of your hand, just our
the
solar system.
galaxy, our galaxy would
The
be
Milky Way galaxy would be the
okay.
size of North America at that scale.
Yeah, that
That's
sounds about
insane.
right. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that it blows my mind. And that's just
Oh,
the
yeah.
Milky Way.
That's just our
That
one galaxy,
that's just
and
our
it's not even
one,
the biggest galaxy.
and it's not
Andromeda is
even
even bigger. Go figure that.
so that's
we're,
why
we're
it
we're now we're a huge galaxy, but Andromeda
yeah,
is actually bigger than us. Astronomers believe, they think we're about 100 billion stars and 100 billion light years across, give or
yeah,
take. They think Andromeda is 200 to 300 billion stars.
yeah.
So, I
And
mean,
then and as far as intelligent life goes, I mean, they say like, well, if there is intelligent life, why haven't we picked up any radio signals or things like that? Because surely, if there was intelligent life out there, they would have developed the technology to send out
that's
radio
the whole
signals.
that's the whole Fermi paradox.
The
Yeah,
Fermi
we can talk about
paradox.
that. Yeah, it's
But
fascinating. Yeah.
considering the great expanse of the universe, who knows if there's some human civilization, or some, not human, obviously they wouldn't be human, some intelligent civilization out there that has sent out radio signals. They just haven't gotten to us yet. They just haven't
Yeah,
got. There's just
could be,
too. It's just too
could be,
dang far away, and they just have.
could be.
So who knows if there's a million intelligent life civilizations out there that are all sending out signals all at the same time, and they none of them have reached us. And by the time they do reach us, they may not even exist anymore. They probably got wiped out
Yeah,
in some whatever.
yeah,
And
oh, for
that
sure,
could be
for
us
sure. Yeah,
too. That could very well be us. Like we sent out the Voyager 1, we sent out
maybe we're the first ones to do it.
you were the first. Well,
I don't know.
we take that credit, don't
Unlikely,
we?
but I don't know. It's
So
possible.
I love that sort of science. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah,
kind of
it's fun to
makes me
think about.
sad because just the great distances of time and space, and it's like, well, we probably won't ever know in our lifetime. Like we'll be long dead before
No,
we ever
probably unlikely.
probably
If it gives
unlikely.
you any solace, just think that we're the first generation to actually be doing it, or that's
The
the
first
first time.
generation on this planet.
Yes, yes. In the entire universe, the first ones ever. Like
But
maybe.
that's why as sci-fi writers, that's why it's good to sort of put these ideas into a story, right? Like
Yeah.
you know, because maybe somehow all the greatest books of humankind will outlast us when we're gone, and maybe some future alien archaeologist stumbles upon Earth and finds
Yeah.
troves of books
Never know.
buried in a you know or whatever,
Kind
and
of
it's
cool.
like,
Yeah. I don't know.
and they
It's
can
a cool
learn
idea.
about who we were through literature. I think that would be the best. Honestly, I'm not being like facetious here. I think that would be the best way to learn about humans is through
Like to read our
literature.
books. Yeah. Yeah.
Like yeah,
Yeah. That's one
other
of the ways
stuff.
we do it now,
Yeah,
about history and ancient history and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, because that would be. I think that would be. I don't want to say the most unbiased way to learn about us, but it would definitely be. I don't know. It would just be interesting, right? Because like only the
Hmm.
greatest works will have survived, I think, somehow,
Hmm.
some way, like
Yeah.
Shakespeare, and
Yeah.
and Hemingway, and
Right.
name an author, Ursula K. Le Guin, who you're reading right
She's
now.
great. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like, there's so many great authors that you discover later on. Like, Le Guin is one that's like, she actually won a ton of Hugos and Nebula Awards. And I hadn't really heard about her too much. I already knew about her for like a little while.
Yeah,
But she was actually a big author. And like, I think she'll get more and more discovered as time goes by. How great her work was.
yeah,
Um, and there's even people like Frank Herbert, like the author of Dune. Um, like he was I mean, his book was great, but like when he first tried to publish it, they thought it was like too much. It was weird, and it's like they didn't want to publish it. And
yeah.
like it became a great like story, and it's like many years later now there's a great movie on it, and it's like that it's become its own universe. Like many
And
years
there's a
after the
show
book
too,
gone.
by the way.
Yeah. So you never know when it will get discovered. Sometimes it's just things are ahead of their time, or they're very like, I mean, readings take some time, so sometimes it's just word of mouth and it spreads, and you never know. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And that is going to be the next book of discussion for us, right? For our little book club. So Animal Farm, that was our book club book for this month. Next month
Yeah.
it'll be Left Hand of Darkness, which I know you've already started reading. I haven't
Which
started reading yet.
check out my cover. It's all ripped off.
Oh,
I don't have a cover for Left
where'd you get
Handed
that
Darkness.
copy?
This is my uncle's old book, and I did have the front where it said Left Hand of Darkness, not the cover, but the front page, and then that fell off too. So now I just have the table of contents.
I like that you have an uncle that reads, because most of my
Yeah,
uncles don't
yeah.
read. I don't
Well, he
know that
used
they've
to
ever read a
read. Yeah,
book in their life.
yeah. He used to be a big reader, so he has a lot of old sci-fi. So
We really you know what we need to do? We need to get Dolly Parton on this show because she's a big advocate of books for kids and books for
oh,
get
reading.
people to read. Let's get
Yeah,
her on the show. Let's get her
yeah,
on the
yeah. It was
show,
good.
and let's talk about like why everybody needs to read. Adults, kids, I don't care.
Right.
Everybody
I
should.
think
You know,
yeah. I think
so
yeah,
important.
I think reading gets more challenging as you get older, just because like you get away from school and you get away from like these like mandated readings that you
Oh
have to do.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it gets harder to like because you have a lot of responsibilities and stuff too, of course, and so it gets more challenging in some ways. And so
yeah.
people forget that
What was the
books.
longest? Because for me, I went years without picking up a book. And in high school, in college, even more in high school, I loved reading. But then like yeah, college, and then post college and up until, then after that, I would maybe, if anything, I'd read like a book a year. It's only in the last year and a half that I decided I'm going to get back into reading because I've always loved reading. I've always loved having books,
Yeah.
and now it's what about you though? What's the longest gap you had in not reading? I'm curious.
I don't know. Like it's funny. Like I would say like growing up as a kid, I didn't love reading. I was all right. I had like Goosebumps and Animorphs. That was my first like
Same,
into reading. You know, and
same.
I was more in video games. I was definitely the video game person. As a lot of kids are nowadays. But then like as I got older, I think there was the transition for me was really it was definitely college because then I became an English major. And as I started writing more, then I started reading more and I started appreciating it more. I got better at it and I could see how it was improving my thinking and my writing. And so I saw the power of it. And so that's when I really gained appreciation for it. And then I just found out. And then, because also one of the problems with school too that I found is like when you're younger, they really give you like all these books that you're forced to read, right? So like they give you, oh, you have to read this, you have to read this, and you may not find, especially as a kid, you may not find something you like because sometimes you read like books that like as a kid, honestly, it's not going to excite you.
Yeah,
And so like you only get excited for it when you're older, then you appreciate it more. And so I never found that book that really excited me other than like Goosebumps and Animorphs. And it wasn't until later, till college, that I really started to develop like, oh, this is really important. I love lots of books. So for me, it was a little bit later, but once you rediscover it, you kind of was like, oh, this is really cool. And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't, and I'm not trying to sound Mr. Pretentious over here. Oh, ho, ho, ho. But I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. I'm watching the Dune show right now.
Okay.
Um, and I have to see if Severance season 2 came out yet. But
What show is that on HBO or is that?
Dune Prophecies on HBO and Severance is
Okay.
on Apple
You have
TV.
to check that
But
out. Okay.
I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. I don't. I mean,
Me either,
I
actually. Yeah.
read way more than but here's the thing. I'm on this too much, right? I watch, too much
Yeah.
TikTok, too much TikTok
Too
and
much.
YouTube,
Yeah. Yeah.
more TikTok now. But you know what? TikTok might go away next month, so
That's
that
what
might
we
be over
talked about.
soon.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But I definitely do read more than watch actual TV. So I think that's good. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to say about audiobooks, by the way.
Oh, here we go.
Audiobooks are great for nonfiction, because then it is how you said it's more like a podcast in the sense of like you're learning
Yeah.
about the
Right.
subject. So, I listened to War, the Bob Woodward book about, Trump
Okay.
and Biden and Kamala Harris and
Yeah. Yeah.
Netanyahu.
Mhm.
That was great to finish off on the road. And then the other one was, it was a book about a former movie producer director Ed Zwick wrote a book called well, I forget the name of it, but Hits, Flops, and Other Stories. I'm big into like Hollywood history and movie industry
Okay.
stuff and filmmaking
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
so I loved his book and I got to finish that on the road. So I highly
Cool.
recommend nonfiction audiobooks specifically for the road because you get to learn about something and you get
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, I read a
You
book."
don't get
So
to say that. It's good to do, but don't say you read it.
I'm gonna say that.
Fine, whatever. I listened to it. That's what you say. I listened to
I listened.
it.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah.
I had
I'm
someone read
glad
it
we
to
had this
me.
discourse. I think this is great, by the way.
Because I had someone read it to me and I listened to it, which is
Yeah.
good, but I wasn't reading it. So yeah,
All
do
right.
listen to audiobooks, but I ain't reading. But anyway.
Yeah, it is, but don't listen to David. But
All
yes.
right.
All right, David. So where can the good people find you on the internets?
So yeah, you can find me on YouTube as usual, Baby Sagan. You can find me on what's the new one now? The fancy, the new Twitter. What is it, Adrian?
Blue Sky. Blue
Blue
Sky.
Sky. There you go. The new Twitter. That's how old I
I was
am.
like, what's the name of Twitter?
Yeah, Blue Sky. Blue Sky. Find me on Blue Sky as well. I guess TikTok is going away, unfortunately, but I still have Instagram as well, Baby Sagan. So
It might go away, but
yeah,
if it's still there, if the world is still here after January,
yeah.
yeah, they'll find you, Baby Sagan. You can. I do another podcast called the Never Seen It Podcast.
I've seen it.
NeverSeenItPodcast.com. I even started a blog, neverseenitpodcast.com/blog, where I write articles, well, blog posts, I guess, about
Okay.
movies, and you can find me on Blue Sky as well. Boots Too Big on Blue Sky. So. Anything else you wanted to share? Any news on your book? Any updates that you want to share really quick?
Just on my novel. My editor is almost finished with it completely. So at this point, I think next
Nice.
year, 2025, I'll have to like dive in, wrap it up myself. That'll take a little bit, but yeah, I'm going to promote it next year at some point. So be on the lookout for Project Red Planet. And also, Adrian, I've seen your podcast as well, or your videos and stuff about doing reviews for movies. It's pretty good. So check
Thank
him
you.
out.